Tarzan must remain dangling in the air. However, the ropes holding him up keep breaking, one after the other. Therefore, to keep him hanging, we need to provide him with a continuous supply of rope, around the clock. This is our situation with the evolution myth. Ropes are broken, evidence is invalidated, and fraud is exposed, but only after they play their part in keeping the myth alive. Its followers provide a continuous supply of rope to prevent its downfall. Who is keeping the theory of evolution alive? And what is in it for them? Why do they say, invalidating this evidence for evolution is not a problem? Because there is so much other evidence. What's your problem if science continues to expose the fabricated evidence? Doesn't this indicate the integrity of the Western science that we criticize? This is what we will discuss in this episode. Stay tuned. The theory of evolution emerged 160 years ago. If you look into its alleged evidence and its assumed mechanisms at that time, you will find that much of it is now considered invalid by its current followers. Regardless, they continue to affirm the validity of the theory. Why? Because they claim that there is much more evidence, which emerged later. The genie was out of the bottle, and there was no turning back. The theory became unquestionable and indisputable, and its disciples seized the right to view everything through a Darwinian lens. If any of their long-standing pieces of evidence turns out to be false, they provide their standard response. It does not matter, as the evidence supporting the theory of evolution is so numerous. Let us take a look at the timeline. Please excuse some repetition in the titles, but the information presented will be new and relevant to this episode. Have you any knowledge that you can show us? Yes, much evidence. Okay, go ahead. Present your evidence. They said, "We found a coelacanth fish fossil. It is evidently a species that evolved more than 400 million years ago, then became extinct 66 million years ago. It represents the transitional link between fish and amphibians. It is also clear that it lived near the surface of the sea and had 2 lungs. You see, here are the 2 lungs. Do you know why it has 2 lungs? To facilitate its transition into an amphibian, which would later on form all terrestrial beings. Its fleshy fins are initial formations of feet. Surprisingly, in 1938, the coelacanth was discovered alive and in large numbers too. Apparently, it has not been extinct for millions of years. It also lives in the depths of the ocean, not near the surface. Moreover, it has 2 air sacs, not 2 lungs. All of their allegations were refuted. The falsehood of this so-called transitional link was fully exposed. Even Nature published an article stating, "Half a century of research shows it, the coelacanth, is not the hoped-for missing link between fish and land vertebrates." Thus, the rope of the transitional link between fish and amphibians was broken. Did they admit that Tarzan had fallen? Never. On the contrary, they said, since the coelacanth is alive, it must have stopped evolving millions of years ago. Time must have forgotten about it. The coelacanth must be a living fossil. It is living evidence for the theory of evolution. This coelacanth is described as a live fossil.
A live fossil, surviving without change for hundreds of millions of years. It is a major breakthrough in the world of science and for the theory of evolution.
If the coelacanth is extinct, then this is evidence for evolution. If it is not extinct, then, once again, this is evidence for evolution. If it lives near the sea surface, then this is evidence for evolution. If the opposite is true and it lives in the depths of the ocean, then that is also evidence for evolution. If it has 2 lungs, then this is a sign of evolution. If there are no lungs, that is also evidence for evolution. Yes, we have the right to explain things in this way because there is so much evidence for evolution. Before the acknowledgement that the coelacanth was not transitional, another rope was extended to Tarzan in the form of Haeckel's embryo drawings, which show great similarity between embryos of different organisms. Darwin rejoiced in these drawings. This rope was extended to the evolution Tarzan in 1868. Embryos of organisms are similar in early stages, so they must have a common origin. This is fallacious logic, even if the claim of similarity were true. Yet, the claim was proven false. With the rising number of accusations, from embryologists that Haeckel's drawings were fake, he was forced to confess in a 1909 article published in München Allgemeine Zeitung that 6 to 8% of his drawings were fake, and he tried to justify this fraud. Microscopes show a much bigger difference, Mr. Haeckel, as you can see. By the way, how do I know that Haeckel actually confessed? Am I regurgitating what others say, as those who run out of arguments do? They keep saying, "You are repeating the arguments of Christian creationists." No. Find some other rubbish to counter our arguments. Praise be to Allah, I authenticate everything to the extent possible. Unlike the myth parrots, I even asked some brothers in Germany to find the original Haeckel article in German. They went to Munich Public Library, got the link to the article, and translated it for me. We will provide the links in the comments section for confirmation. Back to our original point. Haeckel's confession was evasive, but at least he confessed. Why are you upset? Science is correcting itself, debunking falsehoods, and revealing the truth. What's the problem? Not at all. No problem. Other than the fact that scientific textbooks in schools and universities continued to use Haeckel's drawings even though they were exposed as fake for 100 years. 100 years after an evasive confession and much discrediting research. Like this research titled, "There is no highly conserved embryonic stage in the vertebrates, i.e. no large evolutionary similarities between vertebrates." This paper reviewed, in detail, a significant amount of research on this topic and concluded, "Our survey seriously undermines the credibility of Haeckel's drawings." Regardless, scientific publishers continued, in deep slumber, to publish these fake drawings. This is a list of 13 different books which continued to publish these drawings until recently, before these drawings began to disappear from textbooks. This gave them time to extend a new rope for Tarzan and fill the void of embryological evidence for evolution. They said, "There is some similarity between slits in fish embryos and human embryos, which indicates their common origin." Just so you know, dear viewers, these slits develop into gills at a later stage, which fish use to breathe underwater. In humans, however, they develop into structures in the ear necessary for hearing, and into the parathyroid gland, which regulates blood calcium levels. Structures unrelated in any way, shape, or form, serving different functions in fish and humans. Nonetheless, the external similarity, according to them, is evidence of common origin. This is expected because the void of embryonic evidence for evolution must be filled. Allah knows how long it will take them to remove this joke from textbooks as well. Why are you upset? What is the problem? Not at all. There is no problem except when you confront the myth followers with the truth about Haeckel's drawings. They answer, like the former executive director of the National Center for Science Education, Dr. Eugenie Scott.
General.
It's clear that Haeckel may have fudged his drawings somewhat to look more like his ideal than they actually are. Now, does that actually take away from what we know about the relationship of embryology to evolution? Not a bit.
She does not believe that it impacts the relationship between embryology and evolution. Not a bit. Why?
And we have nothing but solid evidence to support that from modern-day researchers as well as early 20th century researchers.
According to her, the basic concepts behind Haeckel's fake drawings are supported by current and previous research. In other words, even if this evidence is fake, the other evidence for evolution is more than enough. Evolution is true. It is unquestionable. There is so much evidence, obviously. That is why you hold on to debunked science for so long, to support your myth. Darwin died happy, knowing that his Tarzan was well supported. He was succeeded by the German anatomist Robert Wiedersheim, who extended another rope. In 1893, he published a list of 86 vestigial organs, useless organs, in his opinion. Of course, this list eventually collapsed, as discussed previously. So, why are you upset? What's the problem? Science annulled Wiedersheim's list. Not at all. No problem. Except that during all these years before the invalidation of the Wiedersheim list and Haeckel's drawings, both of which occurred in Germany, these scientists were actively spreading their evidence all across Germany to promote Darwin's myth. Unfortunately, many Germans took the bait which paved the way for Hitler, through his book Mein Kampf, to promote the concept of superiority for the Aryan race. He fought wars which claimed millions of lives and launched eugenics campaigns to improve the human gene pool, killing many more. A tragedy which is reflected in the eyes of this poor victim, a less evolved human, in the evolution lunatic's perspective. California State University history professor Richard Weikart, in his book Hitler's Religion, presents evidence that Nazism promoted the evolution myth in schools and universities. Yes, science slashes Tarzan's fake ropes such as Haeckel's fetuses, or those based on ignorance such as Wiedersheim's list, but only after these ropes are utilized in the promotion of the evolution myth and the destruction of humanity. The Piltdown man's skull was another rope extended to Tarzan in 1912. It was cut off in 1953, after the scientific community discovered that it was a forgery. Do you know, in the 41 years before the fraud was exposed, how many articles and papers were written about Piltdown Man? According to Nature's website, it's more than 500 articles and papers. Click this link and take a look at the research titles. The Piltdown Mandible. Analysis of the first and second lower molars of the Piltdown mandible. Someone would write a paper, and 105 other papers would reference it. It's a game, dear viewers, a child's game in the full sense of the word. More than 500 articles and papers about a fake skull. Keep in mind, dear viewers, that the idea of transitional fossils is fundamentally comedic and absurd. We explained this in detail in the episodes. Address Them as Children and Who Stole the Million. We showed that even if we indulge them to the extent possible, the myth requires innumerable transitional forms, above and below ground. The concept of transitional forms treats organisms as funny, pliable, photoshopped images. It ignores genetic encoding and differences in internal systems and cell structures. More importantly, it overlooks the evolutionists' denial of intent in the transition from one organism to another, i.e., that there is no agency involved in the conversion of one organism to another, as gradualism might imply. Instead, organisms evolve randomly in every direction. You can imagine then how absurd it is to hold a skull-like Piltdown or a fossil-like Archaeopteryx and study every inch of it as evidence for their myth. In 1922, the Nebraska anthropoid primate rope joined the Piltdown man rope to prop up the myth, based the discovery of a tooth. This rope was cut in 1927 after it was discovered to be a pig's tooth, but not before this tooth helped set in motion the teaching of Darwin's myth in schools in many U.S. states. Was the myth removed from textbooks once it was discovered to be a pig tooth? Of course not. Why not? Because even if this evidence is gone, there is so much other evidence. Let us take a look at one. After both Piltdown and Nebraska ropes were cut, they found a jaw. They assumed it was from a transitional link between man and his animal ancestry and called it Ramapithecus. Based on this jaw, they drew the whole image. Thus, Tarzan was able to swing on this rope until the early 1980s. However, when successive research proved no relationship between this creature and humans, they stopped mentioning it. In 1974, before the Ramapithecus rope was cut off, the Lucy fossil rope was extended. They claimed Lucy was a primate and gave her a catchy scientific name, Australopithecus afarensis. After more than 30 years, this rope began to erode, with research findings such as this one, conducted by the myth disciples, which cast doubt on the role of Au afarensis as a modern human ancestor. In addition, this outstanding article by our brothers, Muslim researchers, titled Google and Lucy Fossil, details the extent of fraud and deception in using this fossil as evidence. In 1975, 1 year after the Lucy rope was extended, a German professor of anthropology, Rainer von Zieten, started providing Tarzan with rope and continued over a period of more than 30 years. He claimed the discovery of a large number of skulls belonging to a transitional period in human evolution. Books were full of his work until he was exposed. A commission from Frankfurt University issued a memorandum accusing him of falsifying evidence over a span of 30 years. The news spread throughout the world. Rainer had also tried to benefit financially from his service to the myth. He made a deal to sell chimpanzee skulls, passing them off as evidence of our alleged evolution, as if he was telling the buyers, "Come buy the skulls of your ancestors." He was following the example of the church when it took advantage of people's faith to sell mythical penance indulgences. In 1999, while Reiner's rope was still extended, another rope was provided to Tarzan, the Archaeoraptor rope. National Geographic featured it as its cover photo, and the fossil sold for $80,000. This new rope was cut in 2001, and Nature published a confirmation that the fossil was a forgery. After the Reiner and Lucy ropes were cut, Tarzan swung over to the Ida rope, whose fossil was purchased by the Norwegian doctor Jorn Hurum for $1 million, and publicized as one of the first human ancestors that lived 47 million years ago. It was even given a fancy scientific name, Darwinius massillae, in memory of Darwin. The media touted it as the eighth wonder of the world. Even Google got carried away and changed their logo to Ida. The BBC and the American History Channel released several documentaries on Ida titled The Link. Subsequently, Nature published an article denying this fossil's relationship to humans and suggesting that it may belong to ancestors of today's lemurs. So, dear viewers, the bone that your child digs out while playing, and you say, "Throw it away, son, go wash your hands," would have been hailed by Tarzan's disciples as a momentous discovery to be promoted in numerous documentaries. Subsequently, several media sites accused Dr. Hurum of intentionally forging the fossil in order to get his cash back. The Orseman primate was a rope extended to Tarzan in 1984, based on the discovery of a skull fragment. The rope was cut off in 1997 after it turned out to be a skull of a small donkey. TalkOrigins.org, commenting on the Orseman scandal, said, "Whatever the status of the fossils, they do not affect the validity of the rest of the evidence for human evolution." In other words, the evidence for evolution is so plentiful. As usual, in 1989, before the Orseman rope was cut off, the pelvic bones in whales, rope was extended to Tarzan, only to be slashed in 2014. We explained the details of this scandal in the episode Wakey Wakey. No worries. Another rope was extended that same year. In one of his lectures, Dr. Carl Giberson, former vice president of the Biologos Foundation, exhibited an image of a child with a tail, saying,
"But some babies do. Some babies arrive in the maternity ward with tails. We have genes to build tails."
Giberson considered this picture as evidence of human evolution from animal origins. He stated that humans have genes to build tails, but these genes are only expressed in some people. Of course, it turned out that the image was fabricated, photoshopped, copied from a comic website called Cracked.com, and that what he considered to be an occasionally expressed tail gene, i.e. remains of animal origins, was in reality a geneb that regulates the cell development needed for every human. Shame on you, Giberson. Come on. Using photoshopped images, hiding facts and lying, and all this mix-up. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? What was Dr. Giberson's response? He claimed to have been fooled and said, "No point is implied by the image beyond what is well established by other legitimate images," i.e., even if this is false, the evidence is so numerous. Where is this other evidence? It is nothing but a mirage. A mirage. The claim of junk DNA was yet another stupid rope extended, then cut off. After the publication of the Genome Project in 2012, it is no longer mentioned. Why are you upset? The mistake was corrected. It was corrected, but when? Only after Kenneth Miller, professor of biology at Brown University, presented junk DNA as evidence to win the case for the evolutionists on the first day of the Dover trial. Do you remember, in our last episode, the lawsuit brought against a school for its proposal to teach intelligent design, i.e., that life may have come by design, not by a series of random coincidences? Do you remember how the school board behind the proposal was strongly rebuked and lost the case? This became an example for anyone who dares to defy the gods of evolution. Miller, testifying for the evolutionists, said that parts of the DNA are broken, faulty, and non-functional. It's just a mess. The Genome Project, 9 years after the court's ruling, nullified Miller's claim. Did that result in allowing the school to teach intelligent design, or at least that evolution is not the absolute truth? Of course not. Why not? Because even if the junk DNA claim is false, the evidence for evolution is so numerous. Where is this evidence? All evidence turns out to be a mirage. Science eventually discovers its invalidity, but after what? After it provides decades of life support to the myth, after it is imprinted in the minds of new victims. Only then does the validity of the evidence expire. You may say, there may have been some mistakes in some scientific fields, but they've been corrected and people have benefited. Well, there is useful science which doesn't contradict mind, innate nature, or observation. On the other hand, there's the evolution myth, which, as discussed in previous episodes, contradicts all of that and is absolutely useless. Put yourself in the shoes of a young man who lived 100 years or so ago and was told what you're being told now. The evidence for evolution is so numerous. Look at that evidence now. Cut ropes, even by the admission of Tarzan's disciples themselves. You may ask, why are you bringing up evidence that's been discarded by the evolutionists themselves? Talk about the evidence they still consider to be true. My goal is to demonstrate the Tarzanian principle used by the myth disciples. Whenever a rope is cut, extend another. We've already covered the current ropes that Tarzan is clinging to, and we cut them off ourselves in the previous episodes. They'll probably remove them from their textbooks 10 or 20 years from now, but only after new ropes are extended to Tarzan. And the story goes on. Indeed, in the previous episodes we cut the ropes using, in many cases, research findings from Tarzan's disciples themselves. The design faults in the retina, we cut it. The appendix, cut. Birds with useless wings, cut. Snakes' backbones, cut. Neanderthal man, cut. Similarity in species, we cut it. 99% genetic similarity between humans and chimps, cut. 99% of scientists believe in evolution, cut. The claim that the theory of evolution is useful and indispensable for medical purposes, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, we cut them all off. The antibiotic-resistant bacteria rope, cut. Lenski's experiment in citrate-utilizing bacteria, cut. We cut many more ropes. Our brothers, the Muslim researchers, have cut hundreds of other ropes in hundreds of articles using modern scientific evidence. After all this, have you any knowledge that you can show us? Where is your solid proof which can withstand the test of reason and respected scientific research? Where is your cohesive, compelling evidence? Is it dazzling your audience with triviality? Is it in mixing facts with myth? Is it in arguments from ignorance? Is it in the meaningless terminology? Is it in addressing people as children? Is it in using similarity as evidence of common ancestry? Is it in gobbledygook and references to the unknown? Is it in the list of 14 logical fallacies and psychological tricks that we've discussed up till now? Today, we're adding your 15th trick to the list, Tarzanism. Say, have you any knowledge that you can show us? You follow only supposition and tell only lies. We need real science, not pseudoscience, photoshopped images, or Hollywood movies that deceive the naive. We started this series with, offer your proof in case you are sincere. And we're about to conclude it with, have you any knowledge that you can show us? This is the Quranic methodology. It is a methodology based on knowledge and proof, not delusions and myths. Our religion, praise to Allah, is based on unequivocal foundational verses and strong, integrated, independent evidence to interpret the allegorical texts, a perfect, harmonious framework. Where in the Darwinian religion do we find a single solid foundation, or a single independent, conclusive piece of evidence? Don't you myth disciples nitpick our allegorical texts intentionally to lead people astray? Don't you block people from Allah's clear foundational evidence? What do you have to offer people other than ambiguities, delusions, and myths? Say, have you any knowledge that you can show us? Scholars of Hadith, prophetic tradition, have a beautiful saying. If a Hadith has multiple chains of narrators, with liars, fabricators, and non-pious people in every chain, then its multitude of narration chains only weaken it further, and none of the chains can support the other. Someone fabricates a Hadith, another plagiarizes it, a third likes the lie, views it as distinctive, and decides to spread it. This is Tarzanism in action. When you find Tarzan's disciples extending one fragile rope after another, you realize that they lack solid integrated evidence and need to resort to one lie after another, following in the footsteps of their ancestors, who said, "Do not listen to this Quran, drown it in frivolous talk, you may gain the upper hand." Remember, dear viewers, we did not only slash the ropes, but also showed that those which are true are evidence for the greatness of creation and manifestations of ability, wisdom, and fine-tuning, as in the episode Citrate Utilizing Bacteria, the discussion on penguin wings, eye design, diversification of organisms with similar genetic material, and much more. In our episodes, dear viewers, we learned the technique of slashing the false evidence ropes from their base. We showed the falsehood of all vestigial organ claims, and how to respond that this was a fallacy from ignorance and shift the burden of proof unto them. We proved the absurdity of all fossil-based evidence and showed you how to force them to accept the necessary consequences of their theory, as in the episode Who Stole the Million? The concept that random mutations can produce beneficial traits was invalidated in the episode Address Them as Children. The principles of homology, reference to the unknown, and others were rooted out completely. Now, when you hear of a new rope extended to Tarzan, you are able to categorize it according to the aforementioned deception principles. Then, in a calm, relaxed manner, you can slash their ropes and blow away their smokescreen. You do that through a knowledge-based approach without any difficulty whatsoever. If anyone tries to deceive you, tell them, "We will never believe you. Allah has already fully informed us of your news. We've seen your delusions in the past." Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Temptations will be presented to men's hearts as reed mat is woven stick by stick. Any heart which is impregnated by them will have a black mark put into it, but any heart which rejects them will have a white mark put in it. The result is two hearts, one like white stone eternally impervious to temptation, and the other pitch black, unable to recognize right from wrong. May Allah make our hearts white and guide us to follow true knowledge, not myths and desires, so that no temptation, doubt, or pseudoscience can ever harm us." Now that you've watched these episodes, dear viewers, you will not stop at exposing the fraud of myth disciples, but go further to warn people about these fraudsters who spread expired pseudoscience. In summary, dear viewers, the major problems with Tarzanism is that even after a rope is invalidated by scientific research, it lingers on in textbooks and politicized media for a long time. Tarzan's followers do not acknowledge his fall even after his ropes are cut off, one after the other. Instead, they keep parroting the same statement. The evidence is so numerous. In truth, it's the lies that are so numerous and continuous. A rope is cut only after it is exploited for as long as it takes to corrupt minds, religion, and morals, and justify crimes against humanity. One question remains. Who supplies these ropes to Tarzan, and why? The claim that 99% of scientists believe in the myth of evolution was addressed in detail in our last episode, which leaves open the question, who truly supports the myth? Who is supplying the ropes to keep Tarzan from falling? Many different groups of people. First, those whose careers depend on the evolution myth. The Tarzanism of the myth has produced a group of dependent academics whose titles, academic degrees, professional careers, salaries, and positions depend on keeping Tarzan hanging in the air. Imagine telling a specialist in evolutionary biology, "We've proven that your job title is actually Doctor of Mythical Biology." How would he react? Second, anyone lacking the ability to produce useful science, but possessing the artistic creativity to draw a complete human being from a jaw, molar, rib, or any part of a skull. Anyone lacking the skills to generate beneficial knowledge, yet with the wide comedic imagination to picture a scenario where senses or psychological tendencies can develop from random mutations and blind selection, will extend more rope. On this, you'll find thousands of research papers that are not worth the paper they're written on. Third, all designers, producers, and directors of photoshopped images and Hollywood movies, who engrave the myth in people's minds. These form another group of rope suppliers. Fourth, every opportunist who takes advantage of the widespread myths. He glues bones together and sells them as evidence for the myth, such as Professor Reiner and other bone sellers and rope suppliers. The myth has become a moneymaker, as we saw with Hurum and the Archaeopter. Fifth, every pseudoscience sorcerer whose books are printed by the millions who argues that God is a delusion and that the universe popped into existence from nothing. He takes advantage of people's ignorance by falsifying science and peddling lies, earning money and fame in the process, and extending more rope. Yes, indeed, over a span of 160 years, the Tarzanism of the myth has produced a group of beneficiaries who support the myth and are in turn supported by the myth. An army of soldiers dedicated to its service. They will provide a continuous supply of rope because its collapse is theirs too. Many of them are good for nothing except servicing the myth. It is their bread and butter. Their relationship to Tarzan is like a pulley system with equal forces on both sides, a relationship of interdependency. The fall of one necessitates the fall of the other. In their mind, the fall of Tarzan means homelessness. Try to convince them that homelessness is more honorable than faking science and misleading people. Let's remind them to trust Allah, put truth above personal gain, and maintain scientific integrity. Did you forget that? Such notions mean nothing to an evolutionist? These are only random emotions produced by random mutations in a piece of chemical scum called the human being. It is funny to see some youngsters expressing disgust with the merchants of religion, who do exist, yet trusting the merchants of the myth and naively crediting them with the scientific integrity to reveal the truth for the sake of Allah. Those who rely on the myth to subsist are trapped in a psychological state which confines their minds to limited channels, such that any notion that the theory of evolution might be wrong becomes taboo. The dark future which awaits them if Tarzan falls prevents their liberation from the myth. It is a modern-day slavery, similar to that in the Jahiliyyah, age of ignorance. Those before them created idols for the myth, and they kept up the worship. They became dependent on this idol for their livelihood and unwilling to free themselves from this slavery. They became the custodians of the new idol, the myth. The idol must live, and it must be attributed with superpowers and great achievements, despite the fact that it will never create as much as a fly, even if they gathered together for that purpose. It must continue to generate money for its priests. After the shock which followed Nixon's move to cancel the direct convertibility of US dollars to gold, the world acted in the same way, providing the US economy with ropes, as its fall would cause their economies to fall as well. Each side provided the other with ropes. The entourage of a corrupt ruler will bend over backward to defend his excellency, because his existence is necessary for their survival, and his downfall means theirs. A reciprocal exchange of ropes. This is the situation in the new and old ages of ignorance which distinguishes them from the state of belief in Allah, whose rope is extended to all. Allah does not need anyone or anything, while all his creation need his rope. Glory be to him. Reflect on this meaning as you read, and hold firmly to the rope of Allah altogether and do not become divided. Does this mean that the evolution myth is supported solely by beneficiaries and impotent people? No. There are other groups of rope suppliers. Sixth, anyone who has a problem with the church, but does not want to explore true religion. He has two options, the church or evolution. Similarly, anyone with faith issues or the inclination to follow his desires, yet wanting to keep up the appearance of self-harmony and a scientific motive instead of a bestial one, will extend a rope to Tarzan. In the Worshippers of Microbes episode, we explained in detail that the term evolution has become the equivalent of no creation with intent and will. We also showed how, even after the theory was emptied of all its content, and after its followers disagreed on almost everything, they continued to agree on one thing, the denial of creation. We then explained in The Atheist's God of the Gaps and Has Materialism Hijacked Science that the materialism virus, which is the foundation for the coincidental evolution myth, is nothing but atheism in disguise. We also discussed how some scientists stress that their explanations, regardless of how unreasonable and ridiculous they seem, must be accepted to avoid the return of religion. Therefore, the theory of evolution is an atheistic religion. Indeed, it is a full-fledged religion. Its followers provide it with ropes and defend it as staunchly as one might defend his religion. Add to that the official state sponsorship for Tarzan. In the US, for example, the BSCS, Biological Sciences Curriculum Study, is using the grant it's been receiving since 1963 to fill textbooks with the evolution myth concepts. As a result, the allocated space for evolution in textbooks has increased more than tenfold under the pretext of conformity with the secular constitution and the claim that creationism is religion and evolution is science. This happened despite the activism of the Teach the Controversy movement, which demands that students get exposed to counter-arguments to evolution and be allowed to form their own opinions and decide for themselves in accordance with the freedom of scientific research guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. Opinion polls showed massive public support for this demand. Nevertheless, Tarzan's followers continued to prevail. Moreover, new organizations were established such as American Atheists, founded in 1963 by porn actress Madeleine O'Hare. This organization sues anyone who dares to question the evolution gods in academia. The National Academy of Sciences was also founded, with a majority of its members identifying as atheists. We saw examples of its work in twisting facts to serve the myth. Entire institutions in support of the myth. But wait a second, does all of this explain why the myth is so widespread? Here is my answer. Is it possible for a virus, visible only with an electron microscope, to spread throughout a human body and destroy it? The answer is yes, if the person has a weakened immune system. Similarly, the myth virus spread in a Western world left exhausted and sickened by the church's tyranny and mythology. Tarzan of the myth built his delusional glory upon the failures of his opponent. As the saying goes, circumstances create opportunities. This is exactly how corrupt governments hold on to power, by demonizing their political opponents. This was made clear in the episode, The Atheist's God of the Gaps. What remains, dear viewers, is to answer the question which has persisted since the beginning of this series, the one I deliberately delayed answering. What is the question? Why do you assume a contradiction between Islam and evolution? Why don't we reconcile the theory with our religion as some Westerners did? We will provide you with a complete and satisfactory answer in the next episode, if Allah wills. So stay tuned. May the peace of Allah be upon you.